Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Digital PR webinar. I'm Helena. I'm head of Digital PR at Reboot, and I'm here today with Oliver, our search director, and Paul, our senior data manager, to talk about our study on how to optimize strategies for international success. A little bit about this webinar and our study. We explore the media landscape across 4 key English-speaking markets: the UK, US, Canada, and Australia, to help business owners, digital PR, and in-house professionals to adapt their strategies when targeting these markets. The key insights per country that you can expect today is the most popular digital PR campaigns, the most dominant news categories, and the segment distribution of media press. What we're going to cover today, we're going to start with our research methodology. Then I'm going to take you through the country-specific insights, starting with the United States, then going through the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia. Then our search director, Oliver, is going to give you some SEO insights into international links. Our senior data manager, Paul, will give you some insights into how to leverage data in international DPR. And we're going to finish this webinar with a Q&A. So if you have any questions, just share them with us, and we're going to go through them in the end of this webinar.
So yeah, I'm just going to run through the methodology for this study. So thanks everybody for joining. In order to kind of do this large-scale study, we turned to MuckRack for the data, which is a leading database for PRs and journalists. And we looked at all the articles which are on MuckRack in the press across all the countries of interest over the past 2 years. Our main interest was finding out of these articles, which ones would correspond to the most popular digital PR campaign types. So we use specific search terms in order to identify the number of articles that correspond to these 7 different PR campaigns. In our search terms, we accounted for certain variations and excluded terms that would lead to, say, false positives. And then from the final numbers that we got that correspond to all the campaign types, we calculated the proportions across each different campaign type. By doing this, we could understand the respective popularities across each country. But in addition to actually identifying what type of campaigns were most interesting in each country, we also wanted to understand what topic of news and relative sentiment for each article was most popular in each country. So to do this, we took a representative sample for each campaign type in each country and categorized them across 30 top news topics. To do this, we used Meta's Llama 3, which is a powerful large language model based on generative AI that is excellent at understanding context from language. So it is really good at doing classification problems like this. So we took titles and snippets for a representative sample of articles, and using the LLM, we were able to classify it across 30 top news categories in each country for each type of campaign. We also got the sentiment analysis directly from MuckRack, which from this, we were able to gain insights on the digital PR and the media landscape across the US, UK, Canada, and Australia, which Helena will now take you through our insights.
Yeah, so now let's talk about the countries in our study. I'm going to start discussing about United States, which is the largest media press in our study. Then I'm going to go through United Kingdom, Canada, and finish with Australia, which is the smallest media press in this webinar. Starting with the US, the American media loves data-driven stories. The data-driven campaigns account for almost 40% of the articles in the US. This means that data is twice as common than any other campaign types in the country. Mapped campaign comes in second place. For those who don't know what a mapped campaign is when we use location comparisons, like ranking cities or states that have the best pizza or where people are the happiest. Because of the US being such a big country, it's quite natural that regional content will resonate better with the audience compared to national. And in third place, we have survey, quite closely in terms of percentage to mapped campaigns. It shows a preference here from the American media for public opinion. The top 3 news sectors in the US represent over 0.5% of the coverage of the whole country. We have health, which is significantly higher than any other countries analyzed and comes in first place. It means that 1 in 4 articles in the US comes from the health news category. Business comes in second place, business and economy. The most interesting thing about this specific news category is that it's highly positive when it comes to sentiment. So for your digital PR strategy, you might want to leverage innovation and opportunities rather than going towards more challenges aspects of this industry. And another interesting thing about the US is that out of all 4 countries, the US is the only one where world news is highly popular, which can come as a surprise for those think that the US love to talk about themselves. A few further insights into the news categories in the US include that parenting and family topics show up about 4 to 6 times more often than any other country. The US also has the lowest coverage of environment news of all. It shows here perhaps a presence for coverage of immediate concerns in the US, for example, economy and healthcare, rather than a focus on long-term concerns. And surprising for the home of Hollywood and Super Bowl, sports and entertainment in the US ranked lowest of all countries analyzed. And education ranks top 10 in the US and is the highest of all countries. And when it comes to sentiment analysis, the media coverage in the US tends to be more polarized. So the country had the highest percentage of negative sentiment, with 1 in 3 articles being negative, and also had the least amount of positive news stories. Finishing the US, now I'm going to take you through the media landscape analysis of the UK. The British media values authoritative voices, and we can see because expert comment campaign type had the highest coverage of all compared to other countries. This means that there is an opportunity here to place your brand as an authoritative voice in the UK. But quite important as well to remember that data represent almost half of the articles in the UK. So data-driven stories are still important for the British media. And in second place in the UK, we have surveys. Just like in the US, it shows a high interest in public opinion from the media. The UK also has a diversified media landscape. There's a mix of lighthearted and heavier topics, a little bit different than what we saw in the US. We have, for example, sports and lifestyle in the UK. Business and economy is the most popular news category in the British media. Health comes in second, and the most interesting thing about the UK and health is that while generally negative in terms of sentiment, the UK has a more positive sentiment when it comes to health news category than other countries. And lifestyle and sports rank high in the British press, and the most popular campaign type is expert comments. So it shows here an opportunity for digital PRs to conduct interviews with players, giving comments or analyzing relevant topics or events. Some further insights into the news categories in the UK include that the British leads in travel, and the most popular campaign types is expert comment and surveys. So this specific news category relies a lot on expert tips and public opinion. The UK, different than the US, leads in entertainment, and comes as no surprise that British people love speaking about weather, and weather has the highest coverage in the UK amongst all countries. So it shows how this reflects in the media coverage as well. And motor ranks high in the UK compared to other countries in our study. When it comes to sentiment, surprisingly as well for some people who live in the UK, there is a more positive media environment in the British media. When looking at the sentiment, we saw that the UK had the highest percentage of positive coverage compared to any other countries in our study. Now I'm going to pass it to Paul.
Yeah, can everybody hopefully can still hear me? It seems like my video is completely frozen, so apologies for that. The joys of technology and working live. But I'm going to power on through, and if I become animated again, hope it doesn't give anyone a fright. But yeah, as Helena said, it's good to contrast the difference between UK and US. So although there's a lot of similarities, there are also some subtle differences in the media preference and how they like to compare studies. So in this case specifically, we're comparing two very similar campaigns, but they're designed slightly differently for both the US and the UK. So we have the best US state to be a female entrepreneur and the best and worst cities in the UK for women-owned businesses. On the face of it, they could be the same campaign. They're covering the same theme, but due to the different media landscapes, there are several key differences which help explain why each campaign succeed in their intended markets. So both campaigns, to start with the similarity, both campaigns are data-driven stories, which are presented in the mapped format. As Helena's already discussed, these are two very popular digital PR campaign types in both the UK and the US. It's also within the business and finance sector, which ranks highest for UK and second highest for US. So again, you're targeting something specifically that does well in each of the intended markets. In terms of where the data comes from, both campaigns rely heavily on the primarily government data, as both these media landscapes respond favorably to that authoritative nature of government data, for this type of story especially. And both these countries are actually relatively strong at producing accessible and reliable data if you know where to look. Where they start to differ a little bit, in the US, studies such as these work really well by comparing statewide. Obviously, the US is much bigger than the UK, and there's differences in culture, law, economy that vary state to state. And that makes a statewide comparison newsworthy. Typically, it's also the best for data availability, which is always something you should take into account when planning a campaign. Whereas county level or city level data is often less available or reliable, or is just too granular to be interesting to a wider audience, which restricts coverage. If you compare this then to the UK, due to the relative size and culture of the UK, the higher level county data is received less well, with city level granularity typically preferred and crucial in a comparison study such as this one. In short, you've got a media that's more interested in London, Liverpool, comparing London, Liverpool, and Manchester rather than, say, Merseyside, Midlothian, and Lanarkshire. In addition to the granularity, there's a difference in the data variables of interest to shape each campaign. For the US, the focus is very much on women in business and variables such as the female to male ratio in management and executive positions across the business landscape. You also, for the US campaign, can showcase some of the general business environment for both females and for entrepreneurships in general, so things like startup rates, survival rates. This is typically a peak of peak interest. In the UK, however, you find that the landscape for a campaign like this, there's a higher focus on individual circumstance, or in this case, individual circumstance of females. So the study variables are more to do with the number of self-employed females as a percentage of the female population, the gender pay gap across businesses, and female unemployment as a whole. So the interest is kind of lying closer to the individual circumstance rather than across business. Whilst both campaigns are similar and are targeted to the high-ranking business and finance sector, and they're also of the data and mapped campaign type, as hopefully I've explained, there are subtle differences in both the data availability, the granularity, and the context, which allows you to tailor each campaign to boost the success in each market. And I'll now pass back to Helena, who will go through the next two countries.
Thanks, Paul. Now let's talk about the results for Canada. The Canadian media values public opinion. Why? Over 1 in 4 articles feature surveys in Canada. The interesting thing about Canada is that they have a similar campaign distribution to the US, with the same campaigns ranking in the same places than in the US. So a good way to apply the learnings that we talked about in the US earlier to Canada, such as mapped and survey campaigns being highly popular and a good way to use in your digital PR strategy. The difference, though, is that different than in the UK, where expert comment is really popular. In Canada, it had the lowest percentage among all countries. So it's a good way to just reinforce how data-driven stories in Canada are important. Current affairs dominates over lifestyle topics in Canada. So as we saw in the UK, there is a mix of sports and lifestyle together with health, tech. In Canada, we have more what they call serious topics. Out of the 4 countries, Canada is the most popular for business and economy, and it ranks first in Canada with almost 1 in 3 articles coming from this specific news category. Environment is highly popular in Canada compared to other English-speaking countries in the study as well, ranking 4th place as the most popular news categories. And interesting, tech in Canada is less popular compared to the UK and the US, where we saw technology ranking 3rd place. A few further insights include Canada had the lowest motor coverage. So it's quite important here that if your brand is within the motor industry, you should consider tying your digital PR stories into the sectors that are more popular, such as business and finance, or even environment, for example. Local news had the highest positive sentiment in Canada compared to other countries. Travel is almost twice as high in Canada as it is in the US. And lastly, different than in the US, education news is the lowest among all countries. The Canadian media, when it comes to sentimental analysis, has less drama. So they had the highest percentage difference between negative and positive sentiment of all countries analyzed. Now I'm gonna give it to Paul so he can talk about this case study about Canada.
Yeah, so this is another kind of good example of the media landscape in Canada and how you can use a different type of data to drive a campaign. So in this case, we wanted to analyze where in Canada is the most potty mouth or curses the most. And this data-driven story really plays on the focus to both local news and juxtaposes the stereotypes of politeness or perceived politeness of Canadians with the taboo nature of cursing. Whereas a lot of these type of campaigns tend to be anecdotal. For this one, we really powered it and did it differently by using data collected directly from Reddit, which is seen as an authoritative voice for both sentiment and behavior and is popularly used across the world, but also in Canada. The way to do this was, we found subreddits associated with cities and regions of Canada and analyzed all their posts for the frequency and severity of swear words. So although it's a light-hearted piece, it has a solid data backing that resonates with the typical reader in Canada. It also has a mapped format, so we're comparing different regions and different cities, which, as has already been shown, is very popular also in the Canadian press landscape. So it's tailored to the different cities and encourages that kind of sense of tribalism to get people talking while still being light-hearted and not too dramatic. We've done a similar type of campaign before for the UK. And whilst it did receive good coverage in the UK, you find this is where, even though it's a similar type of campaign, you can tailor the data and what you're looking for between countries. And what we found is coverage was good, but swearing is a lot less taboo in the UK. And the results were less surprising than for, say, Canada, which really boosted its performance in Canada. So it's an excellent way of leveraging a different type of data set. I'll now pass you back to Helena, who'll go through our final country, Australia. Thanks,
Paul. Well, let's now analyze Australia, our smallest media landscape. There's a strong preference in Australia for factual stories. Why? Almost 3 in 5 articles in Australia feature data. Data had the highest percentage of all countries in Australia, with almost 60% of the coverage coming from data-driven campaigns. Survey ranks 2nd in Australia, and despite ranking quite high in this country, it was the lowest percentage compared to other countries. And interesting about Australia is that they had the lowest media interest in AI predictive stories. The news categories in Australia, they are more distributed. Diverse interests there is a diverse of interest across news categories. So you can see that in Australia, there is a mix of sports with health, politics with environment. Despite business and the economy leading in Australia, the interesting thing is that the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place, they have a similar percentage distribution. So sports, finance and investing, and health are quite similar when it comes to percentage. The other thing interesting about Australia as well is that politics get high attention. It's the only country where this news category ranked in the top news categories. And the sentiment analysis is mostly positive. and survey is the most popular campaign type for this specific news sector. So it's quite interesting how they focus on public opinion and with a more optimistic tone. Some further insights into Australia include that national and local news are more popular in this country than any other markets analyzed. Property shows up highest in Australia, with over half of the articles being positive. So if you are in the property industry and want to reach out to the Australian market, you should consider perhaps going with a more optimistic tone. There's a low interest in Australia in technology compared to other countries. So we saw the US and UK and Canada, not even Canada, but US and UK are quite strong in technology and not so much in Australia. And weather ranks lower than any other countries in Australia. So it's obviously probably because the climate, it's better in Australia than in other countries. There's a tendency towards more definitive viewpoints in Australia. Australia had the least neutral sentiment articles overall compared to other countries. And it shows how they tend to either go towards more positive or negative angles. So they have a strong opinion on topics compared to other countries. And that's all from me. I'm going to pass it over to Ollie, which will give you some insights into SEO.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, so we've run through some good data on, what works for digital PR and link building in different markets. And we also in the webinar wanted to quickly touch on one of the main things that comes up when we're discussing international links with clients, potential prospects, people in the industry, which on the next slide highlights. This section is going to quickly look at one of the key myths and misconceptions people have when it comes to the SEO impact surrounding international links. Can they drive growth? So that myth, that misconception is that question: do international links drive SEO growth? And even further along that train of thought, is there the risk that having international links for a single market website could even confuse search engines? Do you want to build international links if you're a single market website? And there's a few different things we need to think about to kind of answer that question. And the next few slides are going to go into the key reasons that help explain why this shouldn't really be a concern and why international links can actually help you drive growth, even if you're operating only in one market, or even better if you operate in multiple. So the three key reasons why we can be confident that international links will help drive SEO growth, even for those single market clients, and why we shouldn't be worried about our link building campaigns picking up international coverage, no knock-on effects from that, can be broken into these three kind of categories. First is how search engines work and where they look for truth, where they find out information about where a business is based and what market it should be relevant to rank for or in. The second is how search engines like Google handle spam, and why we can be confident because of the way they handle spam, having a sudden influx of international links is going to be a good thing rather than a bad thing. And then finally, when it comes to maximizing the reach and success of your digital PR or your link building campaigns, what the implications are of international links in terms of the visibility of your campaigns. Yeah, how trying to control that can actually have unintended consequences that all SEO should know about. So on the first side, when we're thinking about how search engines work and where they find truth, I mean, we know that if a search engine is discovering a new brand, they're going to go and crawl that business's website first. They're going to try and pick up information from that site on where it's based, what industry it operates in, what it's best known for. And they're going to use all of that information to determine what markets it should rank strongly in. They're going to find hints in the content itself, and then also in the HTML code if you're using hreflang tags or just general language HTML tags as well. And then we know after only crawling the site first, they're then going to look at third-party profiles and platforms owned by the business. So maybe you're linking out to social media profiles or third-party directories. They should ideally reinforce where your brand's located, where your business operates. And then only at the last stage, they're going to look at external signals like third-party websites that aren't directly linked to your brand and use that to build up a picture of what your business is about and maybe what keywords it should rank for. But knowing this, you can start to build up this idea of where search engines find truth and maybe how they weight different elements of the content that they find. And we can be confident that they're going to trust the the information provided first and foremost on your website, and then secondly on those profiles owned and operated by you, which is again why we can be confident that if you earn international links from third-party sites, that's not suddenly going to confuse Google and make them think that maybe your business is located in those locations rather than the one your website says quite proudly that you're based and located and operating in. So thinking about that is one way. And then on to the next aspect of this is how search engines actually fight spam and why they look to reward natural link profiles. So obviously we know some SEOs will try and exploit weaknesses in search engine algorithms. And as a result, those search engines go through a great deal of effort to try and minimize the ways that can be done. So we know if international links were kind of a dominant factor in search engines determining where a website should rank in what market, some SEOs would go out and build thousands, if not millions, of international links from completely unrelated markets. That would in turn result in those brands dropping in the search results. But of course, we don't actually see that in the real search results. Search engines know that those kind of strategies would be applied, which is why they reward natural link profiles, which include authority links from wherever in the world, all over, as opposed to looking at specific ratios or things like that when it comes to the location of your referring domain. So again, thinking about how search engines fight spam can help us build up this understanding of why international links not only aren't going to confuse search engines and hurt your efforts, but actually going to help you drive growth in the long term. And then finally, we should also think about how international links tie into maximizing the reach and potential of your link building strategies. Obviously, we know if you were to try and sculpt your international link profile, maybe you want for some reason 80% of your links to come from your market. By doing that, you're going to make your link profile no longer natural. The only way you can kind of achieve that is by using guest blogging strategies or private blog networks, those kind of manipulative link building strategies that aren't link earning or digital PR based. And that also moves into the second kind of consideration within maximizing the scope and potential of your link building campaigns, which is if you are trying to maximize the coverage that you can earn, the best way to do that is by going international. And oftentimes you'll find journalists read publications in their industry from all over for inspiration on what to talk about. So international coverage can actually often result in more coverage from your own market as well as those international ones. So there's a few different reasons why going international is going to help get your campaigns the most visibility possible, going to maximize the number of links you can earn. So by trying to sculpt that link profile only being 80% from one market, you're basically removing all of those benefits, and you're limiting the kind of link building work that you could do effectively. So again, this is why we can be confident that you should be embracing and encouraging international links rather than trying to control them or minimize them. Now, on that, we wanted to quickly wrap up this section with a very brief case study before we move into the final section and then the Q&A of this webinar. We wanted to look at a UK-based brand who have seen growth from international links. And this brand is Showers to You. We've been working with them for a number of years across technical, on-site and off-site SEO. They're only based in the UK. They're only selling to UK customers, and they're up against some huge household name brands in the space. They're in the bathroom and shower space. And the key things we've done with them on the digital PR side is use a industry-led approach rather than a single market focus. So we didn't set out to only earn UK links. We set out to earn authority links from any publication that's talking about concepts like bathroom, showers, hygiene, those kind of things. And what that did was allow us to maximize the number of links we earn from these high authority and broadly relevant websites. You can see in the screenshots here that the ratio of links they have coming from various locations is very diverse. But nonetheless, consistently over the last 3 years in the UK, they've seen growth in not just SEO rankings, but also revenue as well. Not only are the international links we built them not confusing search engines, they've actually really helped them carve out their own space in this niche and continue to drive growth for them even today. So on that, I'll hand back over to Paul, who can run through the power of data in digital PR.
Thanks, Ollie. I seem to be reanimated, which is good news in time for Halloween. So yeah, it's no coincidence that data ranks highest of all digital PR campaigns that we've analyzed here. And there's an argument to be made that some of the other types of campaigns we've looked here are still data driven. And the reason data is so important is it allows a journalist not just to say, oh, this is interesting to my readers, but can also say this can be trusted by my readers. You are providing the evidence behind the story, and this gives a trust and authority to your piece, and then obviously your brand. And that's one of the many reasons it's so important to use data and enhance your digital PR campaigns with it. Not only this, if you have interesting data, it can really drive your story, and this really boosts the relevance of the brand. People love to read about facts and figures, and it gives relevance to whatever you're trying to say within the media itself as well. Not only this, data-driven stories tend to be more compelling and engaging, making them more likely to get coverage for your brand. Often, the data is challenging either misconceptions or people's bias, but it's backed up with evidence. So it creates an interesting narrative, which improves coverage. Or sometimes the data just feeds into widely held beliefs, but it's updated with further trusted information. People feel like what they already believed is true because they can see the data behind it. And that's why by investing in well-sourced data, it typically offers you more angles for your campaign. That gives you more flexibility to get good coverage. It can allow you to do several campaigns from the one data set, and that good data can lead to hooks and angles that maybe you just didn't anticipate, which is invaluable from doing a digital PR campaign angle. And that is why at Reboot, we've always been passionate about using data across digital PR and across all markets. And I think the data in this study just kind of proves that. That data is really what gives that trusted authority and is very, very compelling. And it's why we would definitely be behind using data within your digital PR campaigns, regardless of the market that you're going into. So thanks everybody for joining so far. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar. We're now going to go more into the kind of question and answer section. So if you've got any questions, please get them in LinkedIn, and we'll go through some that have already come through as well.
Good. I think we have a question that maybe is for you, Paul, from Emma. I think she would like to know how you use MuckRack to do this sort of analysis.
Yeah, so MuckRack has a database, has a really, really handy search function. So you can first of all narrow it down to the country of interest, so only looking at articles that come out of a specific country. So you're already analyzing that specific market. And then the search terms itself, if you're specific enough, you can start narrowing down to digital PR campaign types. Now, obviously, you're only as good as your search terms. We trialed and errored a lot of different ways and made sure we then double checked with what was coming out that it made sense so that we could trust the numbers. But MuckRack itself is very good at being able to do this sort of analysis. Moreover to that, it's got its own sentiment analysis per article that you can, from a representative sample, you could look at. So that kind of speeds up the process, again, highlighting why we use this as a source. And then because we can take a representative sample and download some of the snippets and headlines, we were able to then use this for further analysis with the LLM, as I mentioned earlier. So hopefully this kind of makes sense.
Good, thank you. We had a few other questions as well that were sent to us when we shared about this webinar that we received directly. And one of them was on tips on how to approach journalists from international markets when you're entering a market. And in terms of digital PR, what I would say is that first, adapt to the cultural nuances of your country when pitching. So understand, as we've just done here, the media landscape and what journalists are after, what are the most popular news sectors. Also, prioritize localized writing styles. So in the case of English-speaking countries, being mindful about American and British English when writing your press releases and reaching out to journalists. They will be more well received. They will receive your stories better if you are actually showing that you respect this type of differences between countries. You can also tailor your stories to the reality of each market as well. And like we've just done here, understand what type of news categories comes at top and what it is the type of topics that will engage your audience in that specific market. And something about data, I think it is like when you go to a different market, you leverage the regional data that they have, the data sources. So you show to the journalists when you share the campaign using original data that your study is credible. And I think something to finish would be keeping in mind when addressing journalists as well. We have this, it is more about Germany and the UK, for example, but we know that journalists in German like to be addressed in a different way. And perhaps this is not going to apply to English-speaking markets, but it's something that is good to keep in mind so we can build that relationship with journalists and showing that we respect their country. I think that would be there's another question, Paul, maybe for you, if you want to read and answer.
Yeah, so from Emma saying that, would your search terms like survey, etc., like would it be things like survey, etc., or would it be more terms within your client particular sector? So yeah, very good question. It's very difficult to kind of narrow down your search terms and make sure you're not pulling in things that's not accurate. So it wouldn't just be survey, because you might find some, maybe an article where somebody is being interviewed and they mention, I saw a survey. That doesn't necessarily make it a survey article. So you'd be looking at specific commonly repeated terms within those type of campaigns. So like the survey conducted by whoever, the survey shows, the survey analyzed by whoever. Same thing, that's obviously with survey, maybe with index. We made sure we excluded things. So if we say the index study showed, we'd want to make sure that we didn't pull things in, like, for example, the consumer price index. So we would exclude that from the search term. And MuckRack allows you to do that really, really well and also quite accurately. So we were constantly redefining that to make sure that it could be as accurate as possible without just pulling catch-all search terms. So hopefully that answers your question.
Good. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I think we're short in time, so I'm going to move to the next slide, which I think Ollie is going to talk through.
Yeah, cheers, Helena. Last one from us. I mean, yeah, thank you for joining. Worth noting, I think we'll line up with the team to make sure anyone either attending this or getting it on replay on LinkedIn, we'll get the white paper over so you can see all the data that was used to pull the webinar together and kind of dive into that and look at the real detail there. If you are interested in obviously leveraging our data team or a digital PR team to drive international links, worth noting that we do have over 80 experts in the agency across 10 different teams, including many experts who speak various different languages, including German, Spanish, French, amongst other ones. So we've got a lot of expertise in earning links in all these different markets. So we're here to help. If you are interested in discussing how you can grow your brand through digital PR and through international links, feel free to get in touch via the website or directly to our growth director, sean.guy@rebootonline.com. Yeah, thank you for joining. Everyone has a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. See you next time.